Holy City Center Radio is episode 138, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, June 26th, 2023. I am back, and yes, I fibbed a little. Well, no, I did give you a caveat, so I knew there was a chance that I wouldn't follow through and have 3 episodes last week. Vacation got the best of me, days went later than I thought, and was more tired than I thought I might be, and it just wasn't going to happen. Got 1 episode out on Monday, but just didn't have the time necessary or the energy at the end of the day to put together the other 2 episodes. So I apologize, but we are back today. I will do a little bit of a news dump where I'll go over some of the top stories since the last episode a week ago. But I'm back in Charleston, and, unless, as always, something else comes up, we should be back at our regular schedule with episodes on Wednesday and Friday this week as well. Disney was awesome, had a great time, went with my parents as well as my brother and his family, my niece and nephew. It was their first time ever at Disney World, and they had a blast, and it was fun watching them just be excited every single day and enjoying some rides that I went on when I was, around their age, and obviously joined them on some rides this time around. I'm not a huge ride person, so I didn't do any of the big scary stuff, but they were fearless. They were doing all sorts of rides with my brother and my sister-in-law, and they all just had a great time. And I think my parents also had a really good time. It was just great to be with basically my entire family, and really awesome memories that I'll cherish for a long time. It was just fun. We ended up having adjacent hotel rooms, myself and my brother and his family, so we could open up the doors, before everyone went to bed at night, so we could just be in and out of each other's rooms, watching shows together when we were done with the parks, or, getting ready to go out and things like that. And, we were traveling on the people mover, or rather the skyline, and together. And even that was fun, just joking. And it was great. The weather, it rained basically every day at some point. But for the most part, the storms didn't last very long. So if we had to kind of hang out in like a gift shop for a little while, it wasn't the end of the world. We were able to get back out and enjoy the ride. So it really worked out pretty well. And especially because the rain would cool it off too, because it could get pretty hot. But all in all, great time. I won't bore you with, all the details and rides and food and all that, but was very happy. I was very happy to go back to Disney. It'd been, I don't know, 6 years since the last time I went. Still enjoy going. I know for adults, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I do enjoy doing it. Um, I think whether you go with a child or not, you can still find plenty of fun things to do. And yeah, it was just great. It's going to be tough getting back to the real world here. But speaking of the real world, we are indeed back, and we need to talk about what's been going on in town. So first up, let's just briefly, I need to mention, this isn't like an official story or anything, but the International African American Museum this past weekend held a bunch of opening ceremonies. For those who weren't invited to attend at the actual site of the museum, there was a public event in Marion Square on Saturday. People gathered there to watch, some of the speakers from the museum. There was other entertainment. Sounds like it was a good time. Looks like everything went off without a hitch. And it's exciting. The museum is officially opening to the public. I believe Tuesday is its official first day. And I'm sure some of you already have tickets. I was able to get tickets for it on, I think it's July 1st. So I will be going then, and I will certainly let you all know, my experience and my thoughts on it. But yeah, it seems like we've been waiting a long, long time for this to open, and there's been some delays, but it is finally opening, and it's exciting. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the museum in person. All right. And with that, let's get on to the news. The twice impeached, federally indicted former President Donald Trump will be the keynote speaker for the Silver Elephant Gala, which is the premier annual fundraising event for South Carolina Republicans. No surprise, Trump remains popular in South Carolina and with Republicans nationwide, for that matter, according to polling. But as I mentioned, he does face a series of legal challenges, including a 37-count federal indictment over his handling of documents containing top secret information. there's been some talk about how this trial or possibly some others that could be announced will affect his campaigning and when it'll be held. But there shouldn't be any effect on him being the headliner for the Silver Elephant Gala, which will be held on August 5th in Columbia. One of Donald Trump's opponents for the in the Republican primary for president is Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina. She was in the news over the last week or so for multiple reasons, but one such event was that she was at a ceremony at the Citadel on June 17th, where she said she feels an amazing sense of pride towards soldiers in the South Carolina National Guard, including, of course, her husband, who after the ceremony, which was celebrating um, these South Carolina National Guards folks. He deployed to Africa on what will be about a year-long tour. Nikki Haley joined hundreds of men, women, and children at the Citadel's football stadium in downtown Charleston to honor members of the Charleston-based 218th Maneuver Enhancement Brigade. Several hundred soldiers will assist the U.S. Army in a small country in Africa, and one of those soldiers, as I mentioned, is Haley's husband, Major Michael Haley. Now, he's not usually part of this brigade, but he's going along with them and will serve as a plans officer on the tour. He'll be responsible for things like crafting strategies, plans, and policy recommendations. This, according to an Army spokeswoman. I find it interesting that in the midst of a presidential campaign, he is joining a brigade that he's not normally a part of. But hey, I don't know the details behind it. I don't know if this was something he was asked to do or volunteered for, but it is interesting to wonder, like, hey, why is a brigade he's not part of? Could it possibly be politically motivated? Who knows? Complete speculation on my part. I'm not the only one who's wondered that. But in the stories I've seen, they haven't really detailed, like, why exactly is he part of something that he normally isn't? Again, was he asked to? Which, fine, if he was and accepted it, makes sense. Did he volunteer? Yeah, who knows? But yes, he has officially deployed, and for about a year now, you won't be, seeing him on the campaign trail because of that. Sticking with South Carolina Republicans in this next story, they have set February 24th as the date of their 2024 presidential primary. Now, that selection still needs to get approval from the Republican National Committee to be official, but it'd be weird for that to be denied, but always possible. A formal submission will be sent ahead of an October deadline. So again, you can not necessarily make it 100%, but you can probably bank on the primary being held in the state on February 24th. Yes, it seems like it's a ways away, but it kind of isn't. And we are just full steam ahead with this 2024 election. I mean, these cycles seem to be early and earlier. We've been dealing with this for a long time already, and you can expect more announcements. But yes, February 24th, on that date and around that date, you can expect just inundated the state being inundated with Republican candidates, television networks, news media, and everything else as the presidential primary will be held here. This was a really interesting article that was in the state newspaper. By the way, a lot of the state's articles are shared on other networks. So, for instance, I usually can find just about any article of theirs on Yahoo. So although I have a subscription and can read the state's articles without, being stopped by a paywall, I know a lot of you probably don't. So I try to use the Yahoo link instead when I share it on, Twitter, Facebook, etc. And in the show notes, you can click over to the Yahoo link. So you don't need a subscription to the state to read this piece, which I think is really interesting. It has to do with the differences in legislations that are passed in the wake of tragedies. And I just think it's really interesting. So I'm going to highlight some of it here, but I definitely recommend you read the entire article. So what's it about? It's about it seems to be a racial disparity in the urgency of passing laws, if passing them at all, when it comes to tragedies. So, for instance, while the deaths of white victims in recent years have spurred numerous changes in South Carolina law, the state's seeming refusal to pass a hate crimes law sends what, quote, an outrageous message, unquote, about the value placed on black lives, this according to some black lawmakers. So since 2016, 3 bills in South Carolina have become law following a death of a white person. This includes the Tucker Hips Transparency Act, the Samantha L. Josephson Rideshare Safety Act, and Gavin's Law. Meanwhile, repeated calls for a hate crimes law, particularly after 9 black people, including State Senator Clementa Pinckney, were killed in 2015 at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, remain unanswered. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, hate crime laws typically increase penalties for people who commit crimes based on a person's protected status. This includes things like race, age, gender, religion, and sexual orientation. South Carolina is the only state in the Southeast without a hate crimes law. And just as disappointing, it is one of only 2 states in the nation without some sort of legislation addressing hate crimes. The other state, Wyoming. As I like to say, South Carolina continuously leading from behind. On 2 occasions, the Clementa C. Pinckney Hate Crimes Act, which is the official name of the hate crimes legislation that is trying to be passed here in South Carolina, cleared the House but stalled in the Senate. That included happening again this year. So the South Carolina measure specifically, which by the way, it passed the House this March by a vote of 84-31. So it wasn't even particularly a close vote in the House. It was obviously, you can tell by that measure, it was supported and it was bipartisan. In any event, the measure would enhance penalties for certain crimes motivated by hate toward a protected class, while also allowing a victim's relatives to sue the perpetrator for monetary damages. At this time, though, the bill does not specify how penalties would be enhanced, nor the crimes that would trigger them. So obviously, there's still some details to work out, but you get the gist of it. Supporters of the measure chiefly blame Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey, who is a Republican from Edgefield, for blocking the bill. For his part, he says there's numerous reasons the bill hasn't passed, and he thinks certain people have legitimate concerns about this legislation, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, this sort of legislation, again, has been passed in 48 out of 50 states. So not entirely sure when looking at all those states where these legitimate concerns come from. So I didn't detail the specifics of those acts that I mentioned at the top. Long story short, and again, I highly recommend you read the full article. It'll tell you all about these acts, but they involved tragic deaths involving white people. And not only did legislation get passed in the wake of these tragedies, as it should, I think, in each of those circumstances, it was passed quickly. So you hear a lot about, legislation takes a long time, and that's true. As we all know, it can be painfully slow to get things passed. But these didn't really have much objection. The one that I know the most about, the Samantha L. Josephson Rideshare Safety Act, has to do with the white USC student who got in the wrong car. She was out at bars or something, ordered some kind of ride share. I forget if it was Uber, Lyft, or something else. And she got into a car that she thought was her ride share. Unfortunately, it was not. And the person in the car kidnapped her and murdered her. That law was introduced quickly and passed quickly, again, as it should. But why? Why is the hate crimes legislation being held up? Why is it taking several years? Why is South Carolina only one of 2 states without such legislation? They've been trying since 2016, whereas those other pieces of legislation were passed within a year or about that time frame. I mean, I think we all know why, of course, but it's extremely disappointing but not surprising. We know how our legislators act here in the state. So again, I just wanted to point out this article, give you the gist of it, but really, please go read the whole thing. I think it's really interesting, and again, it gives you more details about those other pieces of legislation and how quickly they pass and the details of them. And again, those things, in my opinion, should have been passed. This isn't like, oh, you shouldn't pass those either. We should be passing all of these with the same urgency, and not, putting one on the back burner and trying to make excuses for why it can't pass. Last story, some sad news that just happened. The North Charleston Police Department and the Charleston community are mourning a loss of an officer who dedicated his career to serving the public. It was announced this past Saturday afternoon that Chief Eddie Driggers, a staple in the community, has died. He was a fixture in local law enforcement throughout his entire career, and most recently served as the chief of the North Charleston Police Department from January 2013 to January 2018. So, very sad news for the community. Just after we lost Police Chief Luther Reynolds, the Charleston Police Chief, of course, he was still active in the force at the time of his death. But two former heads lost recently. So certainly thoughts and prayers are going out to his family, friends, and anyone in the community affected by that loss. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Holy City Center Radio. Just try to get caught up on some of the biggest stories. We're back in the swing of things. I'm catching up. I'm posting things on the website as well. Of course, I fell behind on that. So there was a massive news dump, as it were, where I posted a ton over the last 2, 3, 4 days, whatever it's been. And we'll be sharing them on Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff. So just playing some catch up, but we're almost there and I'm back in the swing of things. So looking forward to Wednesday's episode and just not having to play catch up anymore. I hope you all have had a great week while I was away from most things related to Holy City Center. And I hope this past weekend was a good one for you as well. And I hope this week turns out to be fantastic for each and every one of you. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. If you want to help out a little bit more, you can go to patreon.com/Holy City Center to sign up for one of those tiers. You can also go to holycitycenter.com/shop to pick up some merchandise, which someone recently did. And thank you to that person for purchasing a t-shirt, some koozies, and some other good stuff I've got on there. Another really easy way to support that doesn't take any money out of your pocket is just to share this podcast with someone who you think may be interested. Also, subscribing, liking it, reviewing it, leaving a rating, all those things help out as well, and they don't cost you a thing. So I really appreciate if you could do that if you haven't already. I also want to thank Cole Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this episode of Holy City Center Radio, and Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every episode as well. Until Wednesday, like I said, have a great week. Of course, good night and good luck.